All right, all right, all right, all right. Time for Tuesday Nights with Ty here with you each and every Tuesday around 7 o'clock to talk about the week's issues, things that went on, and all that jazz as we go live here on YouTube. And then obviously people can watch it on YouTube later on as well. Phillies game tied 1-1. You can have the Phillies on, you have me on the background, and it's all good. I'll be able to make some announcements about what I'm doing next very, very soon. Very, 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 very soon. I'll be able to make some of those announcements. So I'm excited about that as well. So we'll be getting to that in just a little while. But we'll start with the Stephen A issue, and then we'll go from there because I just have a question because I don't want to pile on. I don't want to pile on. I don't want to. Yeah, I'm not going to pile on. I'm just going to talk to the people about the situation. So to start with, well, we know what happened with Stephen A. Smith. If you don't know what happened with Stephen A. Smith, actually, and this conversation is for everybody, but it can be sensitive. And again, I'm not going to pile on Stephen A. I actually have questions for the people, and then I'll give my opinion once I get some feedback from the people. But the National Association of Black Journalists does a particular they every year they have a big conference. A lot of people go. It was in Atlanta this year. It goes from city to city, and a lot of people go and get to know black journalists over the years. And the key word I want to have there is journalist. And Stephen A. Smith was very upset that he got a thumbs down from the National Association of Black Journalists. And then Stephen A. was upset, so he did his own video. And then after he did his own video, he went on with Cuomo, and he went on with Sean Hannity. That is who Stephen A. Smith chose to go on with after the National Association of Black Journalists gave him a thumbs down. And there are some people who think it was odd that he picked those particular people when the National Association of Black Journalists called him out. That he went on with Chris Cuomo. I don't know where he works. One of those. He used to work at CNN, whatever News Nation or wherever he works, and he went on Fox News with Sean Hannity. And basically, what people are saying about Stephen A. is he goes harder at black women than everybody else. This is just to put it in a nutshell. If you're not aware of the controversy, is that Stephen A. Smith will go harder towards black women, a la Michelle Obama, than he will go at any Caucasian person. That's the thought process right now. Stephen A. refuted it. I don't want to talk about any of that right now, though. The question I have is, and we know he was at the Philadelphia Inquirer. We know we read Stephen A. Smith. He covered the Sixers, all of that. I just have one question for the people out there. Do you still consider Stephen A. Smith a journalist, period? Because I do not. He was a decorated journalist. He absolutely was a journalist. Is he still a journalist? And my answer for that is very simple. He's not. He's no longer a journalist. He's a commentator. He's a commentator. First Take is very popular. He decided to do a politics show. I don't know why. He does a show on SiriusXM on sports. But at the end of the day, he is a commentator. And that's great. He's a commentator. That's what he is. He is not anymore a journalist. When was the last story that he broke? Is he even credentialed anymore? Most times he sits in the stands. Stephen A. Smith is not a journalist anymore. And I think that's what this really comes down to is I don't think anybody really anymore thinks that he's a journalist. He was a great journalist. A lot of it done in the city of Philadelphia, and I respect Stephen A. Smith's journalism in his past. But I don't think anybody in the world anymore, and we'll get to the Eagles and the Sixers in just a little while. People complain about the Sixers and that monstrosity of a just garbage of a preseason game with the Eagles. We'll get to that in just a little while as well. Now I put the poll on my Twitter, And the question was, do you still consider Stephen A. Smith a top sports journalist? Again, not commentator, not do you like First Take or anything like that. Just, is he a journalist? Period. Full stop. Is Stephen A. Smith a journalist? A top sports journalist? Like Shams is a journalist. Keith Pompey is a journalist. I don't think he's any more a journalist. So far, the people agree with me. 79.1% say no, not a top sports journalist anymore. And 20.9% say yes. You know, yeah, he's not a journalist anymore. And that's the key. He's not a journalist. He's still a commentator. He's still a commentator, but he is not a journalist. He's just not. Looking at some comments on Twitter. Yeah, he's just not a journalist. Yeah, so that's kind of just what it is. Yeah, he's not a journalist. I think that's the key thing to remind us. The Craig thing is there'll be answers about the Craig thing soon. But we're talking about Stephen A. Smith. Is he still a journalist? I don't think he's a journalist. So when a group comes at him about what he does, it was interesting that he went on with people who also aren't journalists. And I think this is something that has happened with sports that I think is problematic, because there used to be this line where you had your journalists who were covering everything, and then you had people, there was always columnists, they're still journalists because they're still in the trenches, but you also had people who just were there for entertainment. Angelo Cataldi, when he was young, starting off Brookie and the Rookie, and he was on WIP when he was a young guy, he left the journalism world to do takes. Now we have our, quote, journalists now having to do takes all the time, and I think it messes it all up. And I think that Stephen A. would not be in the trouble that he got into if he was still a journalist. But he doesn't approach things as a journalist anymore because he stopped being a journalist, because his money, we're talking about Stephen A. Smith, has nothing to do with journalism anymore. It's in the hot take world, whether that now be in the sports hot take world that he does on First Take or the politics hot take world. He's not a person any longer that you look for journalistic integrity, because he no longer has journalistic integrity because he's not a journalist. By the way, I don't have journalistic integrity because I'm not a journalist. But I think it's interesting that if Stephen A. is going to fight back from people making accusations about how he treats people, he should perhaps sit down and speak with a journalist versus the people that he spoke to. And I think going forward, for all of us, for all of our sanity, because think about what we have going in Philadelphia sports right now. Phillies tied 1-1 right now as we speak. We've been frustrated with the Phillies. Are they going to make the playoffs? And if they do make the playoffs, can they make a run? Okay. A lot of eyeballs are going to be on this expensive, underachieving baseball team that's played well recently. You already heard the Alice Cora rumor with the manager and all that stuff. You have that on the side. You know what's happening with the Eagles, and we'll get to them in just a moment. The Eagles are number one in this city. You know that it's Super Bowl or bust anymore. Howie Roseman has set this standard. I mean, there's people that go after Jalen Hurts. There's people that are going after Nick Sirianni. Regardless of the case, if they win another Super Bowl, nobody's going after anybody's job, and everybody gets paid and everybody's happy. That's where we're at with the Eagles. They have raised the bar to that level where obviously they're not going to win the Super Bowl every year, but if they don't win the Super Bowl, we're going to look at them a certain kind of way because we expect excellence from the Eagles. And then you have the Sixers situation with LeBron James, where it's another championship or bust situation. They have the most national TV games, and that is why. So I want to explain this for people that didn't understand it. People were saying, oh, the Sixers got an advantageous schedule. Oh, they got an easy schedule because they have the least amount of back-to-backs and the least amount of 3 games in 4 nights. For the record, they have 1 less than other people, not 10 less. But because they have national TV games, we have to recognize you have Joel Embiid on this team, who I love, but you know he gets hurt a lot. You also have LeBron James on his team, who I love, but we also know he's north of 40, and he's not going to play a bunch of back-to-backs. Well, if you're going to put them on national television, you want to, if you're ABC, NBC, if you're NBC, if you're TNT, if you want them on national TV and want them to be on that stage, well, you want Embiid and LeBron James to be playing in those games. Plain and simple. You want the good team. Now, you don't care if Sacramento's players, what they do on a back-to-back. They stink. You don't care what Phoenix does. They're mediocre. You don't care about a lot of these Portland Trailblazers. They're a playing team. The Memphis Grizzlies are going to be terrible. The Pelicans are always bad. You don't care with those teams. But when you're talking about, all right, when you're talking about, okay, the good teams, the Knicks are included in that, the Sixers, you don't want them coming on a second of a back-to-back or be part of a back-to-back when they're on national TV because the likelihood of the stars playing goes down. Now, it goes down less with the Knicks, but it still goes down because if a guy has the turned ankle, you're less likely to play him on both ends of that back-to-back because we know it's about May and June. So the people that had this conspiracy theory, the Sixers have had a very poor schedule in that way the last several years. Tons of back-to-backs, all that stuff. Well, once they consider you really good, that goes away. And that's the real reason they have the least by one, by the way. But this notion that they somehow rigged it, no, they said we're going to put them on national TV a lot. Since they have the maximum amount of national TV games at 34, we now need to make sure that those guys playing as many of them, control what they can control. Therefore, you don't give them many back-to-backs. And the likelihood of LeBron and Embiid playing in those national TV games goes way up substantially. And that's the real truth of the matter with that, okay? When the whole schedule came out, last Thursday, we were on last Tuesday, yeah, so Thursday, that was the whole thing. That was the whole thing with that, okay? It was not a conspiracy theory or anything like that, okay? And the people talking about it, and this goes back to my initial thing with Stephen A. Smith, these are not journalists who talked about it. These are hot take people who just talk. They don't have any facts involved with what they say because they don't need to because they're not journalists. Journalists, or at least they're supposed to, multiple sources, talk to people. Sorry, we had a little technical issue there. Sorry about that. With the technical issue, yeah, so that's what that means. That's what that adds up to. When you have less journalists, then that's the problem. If anything, I think the problem with what Stephen A has run into is First Take is really the only show where there are no real journalists anymore. Shams go on that show, but just to break news. He doesn't go and then talk. And the journalists now are no longer asked to do journalism. They're asked to do just takes. So then when Stephen A makes that decision to do politics, which I think is a mistake, that's just my opinion. He's not running for president. Okay, Stephen A. Smith's not running for president. Okay, and he wouldn't win. Okay, like this notion of like, yeah, he could win. No, he can't. Stephen A. Smith could not win being president. It's ridiculous to suggest. He's not running because he couldn't win. If he thought he could win, he would run. He's not running because he can't win. Okay, he can't win. And NABJ reason is why he's not going to win. Okay, he's not going to win. Okay, so that's why he's not going to run. But anyway, the lack of journalism is how we get these crazy takes. Now, one thing that isn't a crazy take is that Eagles game, that Eagles preseason game, and I know it's just preseason, so I'm not talking about this, oh, they stink stuff. It was by far the worst preseason game of all the preseason games that aired so far, between the Hall of Fame game and all the other games through the first week of the preseason. The Eagles preseason game was the worst preseason game. It was just the worst preseason game by a pretty wide margin. It was the worst preseason game by a wide margin. Like it just was. It was a very poor preseason game. I don't think this means the Eagles can't be good. This is the question. Okay? All these people giving the question, here's the question. Can they afford injuries? Where's the depth? That to me is really the only question with the Eagles, because we saw it with the Eagles' first Super Bowl in history. They lose their quarterback, and then boom, in steps Nick Foles, and we know about the magic carpet ride that happened. But forget that. The Eagles lost their left tackle during that run as well. Could the Eagles afford to lose Mailata? Not wishing it on them, but looking at that game, what concerned me was, what about the depth from the Eagles? Okay, so I'm not worried about if the Eagles are good or not. That's not a concern. That's not real. That's not an issue. The Eagles are really good. I think they're going to win the division. And while the Rams are favored for a reason, the Eagles are right there with everybody else in the NFC and in the NFL. They're very good. And I think the NFC is better than the AFC. I really do. Despite the hype about how good the West is going to be, AFC West and the Broncos, who I do not believe in. I think they're good, but I don't believe they're going to win a Super Bowl. I've been on the record of saying that already. I do wonder if injuries hit, it does appear like they have a lot of guys that stink as backups. Now, most of those guys aren't going to play. They're going to have these open practices this week, so you're not going to see the starters again this weekend. I need to see some performance from some of these backups, because you know over the course of an NFL season, you're going to have injuries. And I need to see more also from the wide receiver spot, because, yes, they needed to lose A.J. Brown. I agree with that more than anybody else. But they did draft a first-round pick, okay? They did draft a first-round pick, all right? And he's been out basically all of camp. He's been out basically all of camp. So where they're going to get production from the wide receiver position outside of Devontae Smith. And that's where I need to see somebody show up, because I'm not wishing on Devontae, but if any wide receiver was to get injured, I think you end up being in a tough spot. Shout out to you, Philly GB. I'll be doing a whole lot of stuff. I'm going to be doing stuff with college football. I'll be doing all kinds of stuff. I am like a week away. Yes, 1 week. I'm doing this every Tuesday. 1 week from now, I'll be able to announce some of the things I'm going to be doing and how you can join me and the fun that we'll be having. So about a week away from that. Now, someone says Stephen A. Smith is a buffoon. I'm not saying all of that. What I am saying is that he's no longer a journalist. He was a journalist and won awards as a journalist, but he's not a journalist anymore. And I think his lack of journalism is what got him in trouble. He left his roots, which were steeped in journalism. So when you start doing takes, because I know this, because on my small level, I give opinions. If I say, you know how many Broncos fans got mad at me for saying they're not going to win the Super Bowl? Because I'm giving an opinion. When you give takes, you're going to then have people be critical of you. He didn't enjoy that criticism, but he never gets that criticism if he doesn't get into politics, because he did not get criticized for criticizing people in sports. He got criticized for criticizing people in politics, and no one asked Stephen A. Smith to get into politics. He did that himself. And it got him in trouble. No one asked. No one was watching First Take for the last 14 years that he's been on there and go, man, you know what I need more of from Stephen A.? His takes on politics. He don't know anything about politics. Stephen A. Smith knows no more than any of you, more than me or anybody else about politics. He's not an expert. He's not great at it. It's not his bag. Sports are his thing. Now, I'm not knocking his money. Go get your money. He can do whatever he wants. He's a very rich man. But he's not a political pundit, because he knows nothing about it. And it got him in trouble because he started talking about something without any journalistic integrity, because he doesn't know anything about it. And that's the mistake that he made. Ultimately, he doesn't know anything about it. Now, going to the chat. Yes, Smitty does have to stay healthy. With all this technical issues, I'll wrap this up every Tuesday, 7 o'clock, Tuesday nights with Ty. We'll be doing this each and every week. Next week, I'll announce more and more what I have to talk about. But Stephen A. should have left, should have did politics, and the issues he got are the issues that he got. The Sixers, there was no conspiracy theory for their schedule. They had the schedule they have because they're good and they want the stars to play in the national TV games. And the Eagles are still really good, but I do question their depth, especially at wide receiver, because no one showed a thing. Everybody have a good night, and I'll talk to you next week.